Okay, everybody. Hi, good afternoon. Good morning to some of y'all who might be watching us from a different time zone. Welcome all of you to this very special CLE presentation. My name's Anietie Akpan. I'm a member of the Houston Young Lawyers Association and also serve on HYLA's International Law Committee. And this committee, in support of President Mariam Anna's focus on international law, has been organizing monthly CLEs in connection with international barred attorneys from different parts of the world. Some of y'all might have joined us last month for our presentation with Ukrainian attorneys. And then next month in September, we'll be connecting with attorneys in the UK. But today's presentation is with US and Canadian barred attorneys who will talk about their experience in navigating the profession with having those two licenses. So we have an Avengers assembly of professionals, very special attorneys who will be speaking with us today about their respective experiences in navigating the profession. So first I wanted to start with, and before I introduce everyone, please, while you're watching, if you have any questions, be sure to put them in the Q&A box. I'll be tracking those, and we'll make sure to have some time for audience questions at the end of the CLE today. So I first would like to introduce Ms. Karen L. Jones. Director Jones is the Executive Director of the Global and Graduate Programs and an adjunct professor at the University of Houston Law Center. She provides administrative oversight for the Masters of Law programs, the Legal English Certificate program, the Global Training program, Visiting Scholars, International Exchange program, and other collaborations between the UHLC and other institutions. Previously, she led global corporations and program development and operations, and served as the programming coordinator for the International Sports Law Center at TMC, Asser Institute in The Hague in the Netherlands. She also served as part of the faculty, where she served as head of sports law and sports management at Rice University here in Houston. She teaches sports law, ethics, negotiation, advocacy, and other topics at universities in the US and Europe. She's also a published author, as if her plate isn't full enough. She holds a BA in Communications and Theater Arts, an MA in Sociology, a JD, is a certified mediator, holds a certificate towards an LL.M in International Business and Trade Law, as well as another certificate in advanced studies in European sports law and policy. And on top of that, she's a Fulbright scholar. So just throwing that out there. And next, we'd like to introduce Mr. Peter McCabe, who's an alum of the UHLC Global Graduate Program. Peter possesses unique international experience in commercial litigation, fraud and white-collar litigation, cross-border insolvency, and is in the tracing and recovery of misappropriated assets. He has lived and worked in the British Virgin Islands, Austria, and Canada. He's a barrister and solicitor in the province of Ontario, and is also an attorney and counselor at law in Washington State, and currently resides in Vancouver Island, British Columbia. Next is Graeme Maitland, who's the incoming chair of the Canadian Bar Association's National Young Lawyers Association. As an active member of the CBA since law school, he has organized events both in Alberta and across Canada to both assist in the professional development of young lawyers and to engage young lawyers to be current and future members of the CBA. Prior to his national involvement, he was the chair of the CBA's Alberta branch of Young Lawyers and articling students sections, and has remained involved at the branch level by continuing to work with young lawyers, as well as the small, solo, and general practice sections. His current advocacy work with the CBA involves improving the rights of articling students from coast to coast, and we're going to talk about articling during this presentation. Graeme is a graduate of Dalhousie University's School of Law and was called to the Alberta Bar in 2017. In addition to his JD, he holds an HBA from University College, University of Toronto, a Master's of Science from the London School of Economics and Political Science, and currently lives in Calgary, Alberta, where he practices at a general civil law firm focusing on family, employment litigation, and human rights. And last but not least, we have Miss Jennifer Brevorka. Miss Jenny is a trial lawyer with a keen understanding of international litigation's intricacies. Trained in the US and based in Toronto, Ontario, she has a wealth of experience navigating legal disputes spanning the US-Canada border. She's actively licensed in Ontario and 3 states, New York, Florida, and Texas. And she's also a registered foreign legal consultant with the Law Society of Ontario. Jenny's practice focuses on advising businesses and executives embroiled in US litigation, prosecution, or regulatory proceedings. Jenny has served as counsel to parties in cross-border arbitrations, and she has tried civil and criminal cases before juries and the bench in provincial, state, and federal courts. Her other cross-border experiences include mandates such as the enforcement of foreign court orders and judgments, corporate investigations, and charge or sentence negotiations with the US prosecutors. Jenny lives in Toronto and is a super commuter to her American firm, Rusty Hardin and Associates, LLP, a very well-known and well-respected trial boutique firm here in Houston, Texas. She holds a BA in history from Yale College, an MS in journalism from the Columbia University Graduate School of Journalism, and is a magna cum laude graduate from Duke Law School. Jenny is a member of the 2024-25 executive slate of the Civil Litigation and International Law sections for the Ontario Bar Association. And she also clerked for a federal trial court judge in Virginia. And that's something that we'll touch on too, is the importance of clerkships in pursuing sort of a cross-cultural legal practice. So I know that was a lengthy introduction, but I wanted all of y'all to hear about how incredible these 4 professionals are and the wealth and breadth of knowledge and experience that they have before we jump into this presentation. So I'm going to jump to Director Jones, who's going to give us a brief overview of the work she does and sort of facilitating these experiences at the academic student level. So whenever you're ready, Director Jones, we're ready.
Wonderful. Well, thank you, Anietie. And I will start sharing my slides. Thank you so much for that very kind introduction. Let's see. Okay. Can you see my slides?
Yes, yes, ma'am.
Okay, then wonderful. Then I will go ahead and get started. Oops, I'm sorry. Okay. So, hello, everyone. And I am very happy to be part of this presentation to share with you information about training and how the University of Houston Law Center trains cross-border or transnational lawyers. So first of all, and did my slide advance?
It did not. We're seeing it. We're seeing it with the slides on the side. Our view.
Okay. I'm sorry. I'm very sorry. I don't know what is going on. Let me try stop sharing.
Okay.
Okay, and let me try to take it off. Okay. And sorry about this. Okay. Do you see it now?
Yes.
The second slide? Okay, good. Thank you. Okay, sorry. So, so many of you may not be, or some of you might not be as familiar with Houston, Texas. So I thought I'd share a little bit of information about Houston. So Houston is the 4th largest city in the US, soon to be the 3rd largest, to overtake Chicago, which is my hometown. We are the most internationally diverse city in the US. I know that most people think that's New York, but no, it's not. It's Houston. And so just about every nationality, culture is represented in Houston. We have world-class sports teams, go Astros. We have restaurants with cuisine from all over the world. We have entertainment from things like opera, live theater, festivals. It's a very rich city with a lot to offer. We have 2 major international airports, hundreds of law firms, corporations, organizations, consulates, and we are considered the world energy capital. We are also an aerospace hub with NASA in the greater Houston area. And we're also a top destination for our world-renowned medical center. And of course, international trade is also a staple here in the Houston area. So with that, oh goodness. And we did, now did it advance? Oh, I'm not sure what's going on. Let's try this again. Very sorry. We did test this.
Right.
So,
that's okay. No worries, Director Jones.
See.
And I think the way you had it the first time, there's a way I think to minimize the like where the slides are on the side where we can like minimize it so that way we don't see what's coming ahead.
Okay. Or seeing now, I think, do you see both? Is that working? Okay.
Yeah, that's perfect. No, that's great.
Let's see if it's going to, did it advance?
Yes.
Oh, good. Okay. All right. So now I've told you a little bit about Houston. Now, University of Houston Law Center, or University of Houston main campus, is about 2 miles from downtown Houston. So we're in a very prime location. And of course, our new John M. O'Quinn Law Building is situated right on the main campus, where it is an ultra-modern building with all of the amenities, high-tech. We also have a meditation room. We have an active learning room where you can do your work while you're on a treadmill or a stationary bike. So it is a wonderful facility. We have a huge courtroom and a large foundation room to facilitate different events that we have at the Law Center as well. So, so part of what we do and part of our charge at the Law Center is developing cross-border or transnational lawyers. And those are lawyers that meet the requirement for practicing law in 2 or more border countries. In this case, we're talking about Canada and US. That now we also put a lot of focus around our cross-border relationship with Mexico, and we also consider ourselves kind of a gateway, if you will, to South America as well. So cross-border or transnational lawyers understand the requirements of two different legal jurisdictions. They are able to operate effectively on both sides of the border, and they understand the important multicultural nature of cross-border legal relationships. So in, excuse me, in developing or training cross-border lawyers, we have 4 ways that we do that. And one is with a dual JD program between University of Houston Law Center and University of Calgary. It's also with our LL.M programs, also with our Legal English Certificate program, and also with customized training that we offer for lawyers, law students, and legal professionals. And I will talk a little bit more about each of these. First of all, with our dual JD program, that is a wonderful program that we have established at the University of Houston Law Center, along with the University of Calgary faculty. It is a program in for international energy lawyers, or the International Energy Lawyers Program, the IELP. It is a 4-year program where students do 2 years at their home school and then 2 years at the host school. And at the end of the program, they end up with 2 Juris Doctorate degrees from each of the institutions. Part of the credits are shared between the 2 universities, and it allows the students to be eligible to sit for the bar exam and practice in 2 countries. So that is one program that we are very proud of with the University of Calgary. Another way that we support developing cross-border lawyers is through our LL.M programs, or Master of Laws programs. Our program is a 24 credit hour program, and it can be completed in 1 year. It helps our foreign lawyers, or lawyers that have their first law degree outside of the US. It helps them to meet eligibility requirements to sit for the bar exam. Texas is one of the few states in the US that allows foreign lawyers to sit for the bar exam. And with our program, we have our US law program, which is specially situated for foreign trained lawyers. But then we also have certain focus areas, 5 focus areas, including international law, energy, environment, and natural resources law, tax law, intellectual property and information law, excuse me, and health law. So 5 concentrations, and any of our foreign lawyers that are studying under the US law program can take classes across any of the focus areas as well. Then we have our Legal English Certificate program. Now, I know that this would not be as applicable to a lot of the people that might be on this call, but we do have a lot of firms and certainly universities where there are international students, and this is where the Legal English Certificate program comes into play. It is a 100% online program. It covers the basics of US law, also covers some of the way that that law is taught in the US, written English, oral communication, English comprehension, legal terminology and analysis, and it allows participants from all over the world to get a sense of what the laws are like in the US, and specifically around legal terminology. And then finally, we have the customized training, and that's when we work with firms, government agencies, universities, embassies, in developing, excuse me, training that is conducted either online or in person, sorry, or in a hybrid form for teaching legal skills, US legal skills, or covering specialized topics of interest to those in firms or at universities, but that have a specialized need that we will help to develop a program around. And that can be a short program of a couple of days, a couple of weeks, or even a couple of months. So these are some of the entities that we've worked with over the past years in developing specialized training. So that's just a little bit about some of what we do at the University of Houston Law Center, not only in working with our law students, but also in working with lawyers and developing cross-border or transnational lawyers. And for more information, here's information on my screen, and I look forward to hopefully hearing from some of you.
Awesome. Thank you, Director Jones. That's fantastic. I did want to ask real quickly, when you had mentioned the sort of customized sort of packaging training that the program puts together, because we are such a big aerospace and space-based hub, are there any sort of packages or training pipelines or curriculums that focus on that at all, or a plan maybe?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Actually, within our program, we have a space law class. And actually, the head of the legal department at NASA actually teaches that class. We put on a program earlier this year hosting the American Bar Association International Law Section Conference at the University of Houston Law Center, and we had a special program at NASA because the head of legal at NASA, her husband, is also the head of mission.
Oh,
so it was an incredible program. So yes, we absolutely do have those programs, those affiliations. And I'll also mention that our central campus does a lot of partnership work with NASA in around energy, around different aspects of supporting the space activities.
Oh, fantastic. Oh, thank you for that, Dr. Jones.
Thank you for the question.
Yes, that was I in my time like practicing and meeting like different law students and younger attorneys who are thinking of what their next sort of steps will be. You know, everyone is interested in, you know, oil and gas and energy, understandably so, because that is our hub, but aerospace is a huge one, and knowing that there's like a pipeline to that path as well, that's fantastic. Oh yeah, Graeme, did you want to hop in before we? Oh no, oh okay. No worries. I wanted to jump from Director Jones to Peter, because Peter's a graduate of this incredible program that Director Jones was sharing with us, a 2010 graduate, I believe, Peter. And I was hoping you could share with our audience, you know, what your experience was in the program and what, you know, sort of motivated you to take this sort of approach to growing your career in this sort of international scope.
Yes, thank you. I would love to. I'll start by saying that I really enjoyed the program a lot. I was very impressed by it. It was a really positive experience, and I can speak briefly about some things that motivated me in that direction, toward Houston, toward the program. So as you stated already, my name is Peter McCabe, and I have some unique training and experience in both cross-border and cross-cultural legal contexts. I'd like to say now that although I'm not currently practicing law, I do hold 2 active licenses, one in Washington State as an attorney and the other as a barrister and solicitor in the province of Ontario. I'd like to say that when I started out as a young lawyer, I was probably not considered a typical candidate for the type of work that I was looking for. I wasn't following any sort of a straightforward career path. I was kind of winding. I had a lot of different interests, and I still do. So before I even started law school, I was already keen on international matters, on the idea of living and working internationally, such that when I got to law school, I started choosing courses that had international components, mostly the electives, and anywhere I could, I would do that. I also became a research assistant for a professor at the law school I was attending who had a very dedicated interest in international human rights law. So I suspect, or I should say, my first love would be international human rights. I really enjoyed the instruction and education she provided to me. And she even one summer arranged for me to go and spend over 2 months in France and Belgium conducting research into what was then referred to as the European Union Constitutional Treaty in a human rights context. And I found that I wrote a paper for her, which she liked a lot, and I learned a lot. But I noticed that, and so I was actually motivated at the time to see if I could transfer that interest in human rights to a career. And I was noticing, however, that my second language skills were not as adequate as they should be in order to find the work that I wanted. So I had some basic knowledge of French and German, but I wasn't fluent by any means. And so this started to get me to think about spending more time learning a language. And I sort of switched focus from human rights to international business. So immediately after law school, after the bar, I applied to a international business school in France, and I was all set to go. I was ready to go, packed and ready, when I received a call back just literally on my way out the door, asking if I would be interested in joining a boutique firm located in the British Virgin Islands. And so I put down my bags literally, and I said, yes, what do I need to do? And so I went through a very lengthy application process. It was a thorough background check. The immigration requirements were pretty strict, and so it took some time. But I was very happy to ultimately make it to the road town on the island of Tortola in the British Virgin Islands to work under the direction of some English solicitors and British Virgin Islands qualified solicitors as well. And so you mentioned some of the areas of the law that they provided training in. And I think it wouldn't hurt to mention those again. There was a lot of training in international claim prosecution and enforcement, global asset tracing and discovery, shareholders remedies, civil accessory liability for breaches of fiduciary duty and trust, and for breaches of know your customer and anti-money laundering protocols. There's also aspects of cross-border insolvency, fraudulent transfer litigation, and two of the biggest ones in that jurisdiction were pre-action disclosure and asset freezing or preservation orders, often referred to as the Moreva jurisdiction. I found, so jumping into this firm in a very high-paced, demanding environment as a new attorney without much experience, I found it very demanding. And I think culturally speaking, I was often part of legal teams that included lawyers from several different jurisdictions in these complex proceedings, and that had to be prepared very thoroughly and very quickly. So I don't think I was sleeping that much during those years. There was a lot to do. I found, however, that in order to adapt to such a new environment with new lawyers and concepts that were not known to me, I think some of the principles were already known, but a lot of the law and the procedures were brand new, and I found that I had to take active measures to keep my mind flexible and to adapt to different, stronger personalities, to adapt just to the schedule and to learning the law, a new body of law, a different body of law. So I also learned there, I think, for the first time, about how effective equitable remedies can be, especially where in matters where the positive law was silent or less helpful. And I was very eye-opening to me conceptually and academically, as well as professionally. So after a few years there, on the career front, I was presented with an option of moving to Europe. I had then and have today a love affair with Europe. I like it very much. I enjoy the people, I enjoy the culture and the food and the architecture. And so I was really motivated to leave the British Virgin Islands. Even though they had asked me to stay, I said I was going to go to work I was offered a job at a very large Central European firm. as a document quality lawyer in their document quality office. And I ended up providing research, knowledge management, and drafting support to practice groups and marketing teams in 12 countries. So it was a different sort of work. It was not as fast paced, but also very rewarding. Culturally, I learned a lot. Working with lawyers whose first language is not English, and then working with them through a legal document and working out the legal English and the casual English and getting translations sent. It was really fascinating. I loved it. So I wasn't there that long, though, before I started feeling a little bit homesick. And I decided that I would start looking into moving back to North America. I started looking for employment opportunities closer to home. I also started researching LL.M programs because I felt a need. I had been working with so many talented and senior lawyers who had a lot of knowledge. I felt like I wanted to be able to contribute more, to bring more to the table. And so I happened upon the University of Houston's programs, and combining that with my need, I think, to get back to family or to relatives, the University of Houston was the certain choice for me. I think after I discovered that program, I put all my other applications aside and I just focused on that. So also at that time, I began, I was able to become introduced to a law firm, a boutique firm in Toronto that was familiar with the firm that I had worked for in the British Virgin Islands. And we got to talking about how I could become licensed in Ontario and to help out at that firm. So I began that process as well, the National Committee on Accreditation process, and then later articling and ultimately becoming a barrister and solicitor in Ontario. So that's basically where I'm at right now. So I don't practice law right now. I'm at a crossroads, though. I had some health issues that came up and that required immediate treatment, and that kind of sidelined my legal hopes, as I think I mentioned before. And so it's at this time now that I'm feeling really motivated to find out what my next step might be in the international world. And so again, I thank very much the University of Houston for that.
Thanks so much, Peter. We're, of course, so grateful for your health and for you being a part of this discussion as kind of your reintroduction
Yes,
back
yes,
into
thank you. Thank you very much.
No, and well, and you had mentioned the sort of the different countries, like attorneys from the different countries that you have worked with in your experience, based on that, and especially now in this kind of like new chapter of getting back into the profession, are there any other sort of countries you're interested in obtaining a license from in the future, possibly?
Yes.
Where were
Yes.
some of those that you've been thinking of?
Cool. So at the top, I think I would seriously consider applying for a license here in British Columbia. But in terms of other countries, I would like to revisit the possibility of becoming a lawyer in England.
Okay.
Yes, because I think I think I'm a little more familiar now with the way things operate than I was, and I would feel pretty comfortable about doing that. I'm also, and this is probably less immediate, but I'd also consider applying for a license again offshore, and if not the British Virgin Islands, then another jurisdiction. I really I like the life down there and the people. It was fascinating.
And would that be barrister or solicitor for England?
So that would be solicitor, and I noticed, my knowledge is a little bit stale here, but I recall one of the terms used was solicitor advocate in the British Virgin Islands. So it's another class, I think. I'm not sure exactly. I don't have the information at my fingertips on that, but
Thank you. I'm here, I'm always like, oh, attorney, counselor at law. And now that we have this like international scope, I'm trying to get the barrister versus solicitor versus attorney right in my
Right.
mind. And before we, thanks again, Peter. Before we hop over to Jenny and then Graeme, I did want to ask Director Jones a quick follow-up question, because Peter had mentioned, his experience in Europe and how that was particularly inspirational in shaping his pipeline in the legal profession. You had done work in sports law in the Hague. And so was that just from a personal reflection point of view, was that sort of the impetus of your international law journey? I just wanted to make sure we were able to share that too, that part of your story.
Yes, well, very quickly, I had a my route was likewise, excuse me, very untraditional. So I was never really interested in doing that, litigation. So really, when I started into law, I started working in a corporation. And so I did corporate work, I did contracts, negotiating, transactional work. And at a point, I had an opportunity to live in Europe. So I actually lived in Belgium for a little while.
Okay.
And while I was going through that experience, doing more kind of freelance work, an opportunity came up where I could interview for a position at TMC Asser Institute. I had worked in academia some before, and I really saw myself going the academia route. And this was a great opportunity to kind of merge active legal work within an institute, an academic institute.
Yes.
And so that's how I kind of veered in that direction. But my interest in international work, I was doing that even in my corporate career, and continued that at TMC Asser Institute, and I continue it even now in my current role.
Perfect. Oh, excellent. Thank you. You had given such a beautiful presentation. I'm like, wait, I want everyone to know what Director Jones' sort of journey is as well. So thank you for expanding on that. And going from Peter's experience and then contrasting it with Jenny, would you mind, Jenny, talking a bit about what your experience was in sort of obtaining your license to practice in Canada? I know it's a little bit different, and talking about not only that, but the types of experiences that were open to you through obtaining those licenses.
Sure. Right out of law school, I clerked for 2 years, first on the federal trial court, and then the way I migrated to Texas was I clerked on the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals, and my judge was based in San Antonio. And eventually I met and married a man here who brought me to Texas, and I started a practice in Houston and joined a firm. But I was raised on the US-Canadian border. I was raised in Buffalo, and at the time, I'm dating myself, pre 9/11. It was the same way you hear about people in Texas talking about going to Mexico. We would ride our bikes across Peace Bridge, we'd take our dog to the vet there. I mean, people have currency back and forth. And so it's a very fluid so if you're raised in New York State or Minnesota or Montana, it's a very fluid sort of back and forth. And at around 2016, 2017, my family decided we wanted to immigrate to Canada, and I still had family in the Buffalo area. And for us, it was a logical choice. But the difference between Peter's situation and what Director Jones is talking about was I did not have the qualifications to practice in Canada. And at that time, to sit for the bar in Ontario, you had to have the ability to work there. One of the beauties of the US, Canada, I guess it's border, and Mexico, US, and CUSMA or NAFTA, if you're my generation, it is written in there that if you are a lawyer in one of these countries and you have a job offer, you have the opportunity to immigrate there. So I had to go first sit for the bar. And what I did to do that, Peter mentioned very quickly what's called the NCA, the National, I forget the acronym there, but if you Google NCA Canada bar exam, it is a test that one must take if you're trained in another Commonwealth jurisdiction to see if you're qualified to sit for the bar. And you generally, if you are trained in America and don't hold a Canadian JD, you will have to take anywhere from 5 to 6 tests. So first I was practicing full time here as a trial lawyer. I sat for 5 tests at different times. That took about 1.5 years for me to complete because they're given at different times. And then I was qualified to sit for the bar. So I applied, and in Ontario where I sat, they have a bar exam. It's 2 days over 2 periods. First is the classes for the barrister, second is classes for the solicitor. That said, in today's modern day society, you get a license and you practice, you can be either. The terminology is still sort of used, but there's not the differentiation that exists. For example, I do have a case that's going on where a client has been affected in England. There is still that distinct differentiation between what a solicitor does and what a barrister does. At least in my practice in Ontario, it's not as evident. Once I was licensed, then I found a job and started practicing in Canada. The one unique difference, I think, perhaps from Peter's experience and certainly from Graeme's experience, is Canada has a requirement in most of the provinces to article, and Graeme can speak to that. My experience though, because I had more than 5 years of practice in the US, at this point, Ontario, which it tends to be very business focused, it's sort of the hub of finance in Canada, allows you to waive out of that by attending a class. I can't speak to all the other provinces, but at the time, most of the other provinces required some form of articling or a prolonged class. And so if you are taking a class and if you come to Canada with a dual degree, like Director Jones spoke of, and you want to practice in Canada, you may still have to article for a year. The last, though, avenue that I was unaware of, and was sort of wish I had known at the time, was there is a thing called being a foreign legal consultant, which is what I am now. So when I first practiced in Canada, I practiced Canadian law. And in fact, many of my cross-border mandates was as a Canadian lawyer advising Americans in the States about what they had to do to litigate or access witnesses in Canada. I now am gearing up and doing the reverse. So I am licensed or permitted in Ontario to give Canadians advice about American legal issues. And there's quite a number of US, or what we call here in the States, AmLaw 100 firms that have offices in Toronto, some in Montreal, some in Vancouver, where foreign legal consultants, certainly on the transactional side, if you're not a litigator, but you'd still like to practice and live in Canada, if you have a job with one of these AmLaw 100 firms, I can think of a couple, Skadden Arps, White & Case. They give a lot of advice to Canadian businesses that want to open and operate in the US. And then there's also the whole realm of the lawyers that practice trade law. Those are folks largely based out of the US, Montreal, Toronto, that speak to companies that have disputes under CUSMA, which is the modern day NAFTA, and litigating that. So I hope that answers your question.
That was fantastic. Thanks, Jenny. I think based on the audience we have, I know we have some pre-law students, some folks who are in law school, and then a number of attorneys who are, I would say, probably under 7 years of practice or under. It's good to know the breadth of opportunities that are available, especially for those of us that are transactional attorneys. And so the foreign legal consultant opportunity sounds really, that sounds like it'd be perfect for a lot of us who might be interested in this national opportunities. Oh, sorry. Were you? Oh, okay. I wanted
No,
to
that's it.
I wanted to, and I had a follow-up question for you about. I'll jump over to Graeme to kind of talk about the traditional route of a Canadian law student, and talk about what that experience was, and certainly the articling component, because I will say, and I think all the attorneys watching and Director Jones is probably has had conversations with folks about this too, the articling and sort of bar reform and the ability, like Jenny was saying, to kind of test out of having to, sit for certain things. All of that is so interesting and intersectional. And so knowing what your experience was like in pursuing your JD and then being called to the bar and contrasting with what we do here in the States will be great for our audience. So I'll be quiet, but wanted to sort of just lay that land.
Sure. So yes, I'm Canadian. I'm a Canadian law grad. I have no accreditation outside of Canada. How it works, if you're a Canadian law student, you go to law school in Canada. Doesn't matter where you go, with the note that Quebec is special, and that's a general thing when it comes to Canada. But we have 10 provinces and 3 territories. 9 of the provinces and all of the territories use common law. Quebec uses civil law for provincial matters. So Quebec aside, if you go to any law school in Canada and get a common law degree, you can go anywhere else in Canada where there's common law, and you can and you're fine. You need a Canadian law degree. Jenny talked about the NCAs, the National Committee on Accreditation. They have these exams that foreign trained lawyers sit. And again, that could be a lawyer who's from another country and is called there and comes up, but it could also be Canadians who go abroad and then come back with a law degree from wherever. The NCA, essentially, by writing those exams and passing it, that gives you the equivalent of a Canadian law degree when you go to whichever province or territory you're in. It's all regular. I specify that because just like in the United States, if you're called in one province, it is just that province. You have to get called in multiple different jurisdictions. It's not, oh, you're called in Alberta, therefore you can practice in the rest of Canada. So once you have either a Canadian law degree or you've passed the NCAs, then you can go and apply. Jenny talked about there are some law societies, which are the governing bodies, the provincial governing bodies. Some of them allow, if you have a certain amount of experience, that you don't have to do an articling requirement. I'm going to work on the presumption that a lot of people who are listening would not have that, and they would have to go in there. So what you have to do is you have to do 2 things. So there's 3 things ultimately to get called to the bar in any province. Number 1, you need to have your Canadian law degree or NCA equivalent. So we've done that. The other 2 things are you need to article. And then the third thing is you need to either pass the bar exams or pass the bar course. I'll talk about that in a second. Articling. This is the big thing. Articling is, for all intents and purposes, an apprenticeship. You have to do 3 years of your law degree, but then you have to do essentially 1 year of an apprenticeship. It varies. It changes based on which jurisdiction, which provincial jurisdiction you're in. Sometimes it's a little less than a year, but it's usually about 10 to 12 months. And the premise behind that, the logic behind that would be school is great and you can get plenty of experiences in school. It's primarily academic. You may do a clinical placement and you get some experience dealing with people. By the way, for all those people who are here who are in law school or looking to go into law school, absolutely 100%. If there's a clinical option, take it, do it, go and actually work with people. It doesn't matter if I just want to do corporate law and work in a big, no, go and work with people. So even if you do something like that, the theory would be you don't have enough breadth of experience in terms of actually engaging with multiple subjects, actually applying the academic to the reality. So articling is a 1-year apprenticeship. It's similar to, but not directly analogous to, medical residence.
And Graeme,
so you have to do, yeah.
Before you continue, I just want to, who, and is it the schools that are organizing facilitating
No.
these apprenticeships?
No, so the articling is you have to, individuals have to find an articling principal. So a lawyer who has to meet certain requirements, and again, it varies by jurisdiction. Some require training, some don't. It's usually there's a minimum you have to have been called to the bar to be eligible to be principal. So you have to go and find one. There are several, there's usually a time period where big firms and governments will go to Canadian law schools to do on-campus interviews and you can get like a summer position between your first and second year and your second and third year, where they're essentially trying you out for articles, and they'll guarantee that afterwards. But that is just it's not run by the schools. It's run by all the various governments or the firms. The school Canadian law schools do, though, help facilitate that. But ultimately, you need to find someone. And if you go to like the websites for big firms in Canada or government or the governments, they will have, like, if you're looking for an articling position, here's how you go and you fill it out. I'll just make a quick note about clerkships with judges. You can, of course, you can clerk with the various courts here in Canada. Those in most jurisdictions do not count for full articles. It is usually you have to do a clerkship, and then you have to go and do at least a couple months at another firm, at an actual firm or with a government, because again, it's sort of treated as like, hey, that's great that you work for the court, but that is not the equivalent of being a lawyer and actually going and doing practicing law. It's more academic in that respect. So you have to go and find your articling principal. Again, some big firms and governments, they have the running thing. I ended up articling at the firm that I'm at now. I've been here the whole time. I just reached out and said, hey, I was looking for articles. I cast my net very wide. I applied in every province and territory except Quebec, and I was at a point where I was almost desperate enough to start pretending I spoke French and had a civil law degree. But I went and did interviews all over the country, and I ended up here, conveniently at a firm that was at the time 10 minutes away from my house. But I did 1 year. So you do your articling, you do 1 year. And again, ostensibly what you are supposed to be doing is you are getting trained in the actual, this is how you practice law. And it's not just, here's how you go to court, or here's how you deal with contracts or things like that. It's also, sorry, I'm getting a phone call. Go away. It is also, here's how just the life in a firm. Here's how you deal with files. Here's how you track your time, which of course is a very big thing. That is definitely something I did. I worked at, when I was at Dalhousie, I worked at Dal's Legal Aid Clinic as part of my coursework. I got a lot of experience on running files, meeting with clients and all that stuff. The one thing I 100% did not learn about is how to bill time, because it was a legal aid clinic. You don't really bill time. So that was definitely a teachable moment here with articling. So you do essentially your 1 year of articling. While you're doing that, you also have to do, in some jurisdictions, Ontario is probably the best example, you have to do your bar exams. As Jenny said, they divide the exams into two sections. There's a barrister exam and a solicitor exam. Just so people know, yes, in other countries like England and Wales, they do differentiate between barrister and solicitor. Barrister are those who can cross the bar. Those are advocates. Those are the people who go to court. So, if you think in sort of the British tradition, the lawyer, the barrister with the wig and the robes, that's a barrister. Solicitor does paperwork for all intents and purposes. I acknowledge. I see Peter sort of looking at me like I acknowledge I'm streamlining it. But solicitors do the paperwork. So in the UK, you would go to a solicitor for your will or for your real estate or things like that. In Canada, every lawyer is called as a barrister and solicitor. So it's acknowledgement that, look, you can do everything, but we're just going to use the titles. So you have to write the barrister exam, then you have to write the solicitor exam. So the barrister exam would have questions about criminal law stuff, family law stuff, actual application stuff that you would do in court. And the solicitor exam would have more sort of will questions or real estate questions. In other jurisdictions like Alberta, there are bar courses. So the bar course that's the biggest, it's run by an organization called CPLED. It's called LEAP. The course is called LEAP. It is in Alberta, Manitoba, Saskatchewan, and Nova Scotia. What that is it is a simulation of essentially being in a law firm and running through various scenarios. So a client comes in, gives this information, you need to write a memo to this person and draft this document and all that stuff. It's again, some places do an exam, other places do the bar course for the simulation, saying like, an exam, it's not as practical, all that stuff. But anyway, wherever you are, whatever jurisdiction you tend to get called in, you have to do, in addition to your articles, you have to do either the bar course or the bar exam. Once that's done, so you've got your Canadian law degree or NCA equivalent, you've completed your articles, and you've passed the bar exam or you've passed your bar course. Then you can actually get called to the bar. So once that's done, you are then licensed as a barrister and solicitor in whichever province or territory. And now you are a lawyer. You can actually go out and do all of that. You can stay at the firm you're at. You can hang your own shingle, but that is what you're looking for. So that's the basic process. Again, if you're a Canadian law student, as well as if you are a foreign trained lawyer, again, just get a Canadian law degree with pass the NCAs. Then you have to go and find and complete articles and pass the bar exam or the bar course.
Awesome, Graeme. Thank you. And then you apply or reach out to Director Jones and say, I want to come to Houston and come and
now I'd like to
hang
do
out
my
with
master's.
us. Yes, thank you for that breakdown. We had a couple of questions for the panel, and then I had my own question, but in case there's a few folks who have to log off a bit early, I did just drop the course number in the chat, and I'll make sure the panel gets today's course number today as well. But we had some from the audience ask that they've been licensed in Canada for about a year, and then they also recently passed the New York bar. They have a background in privacy and utility, electricity and utility law. What sort of market would there be for someone who has that sort of background? Really interesting background. Any thoughts on that? What they could pursue or what sort of spaces they could navigate? Sounds kind of like on the transactional side.
What was the pedigree again? It was
licensed in Canada and New York, background in privacy and electricity utility law.
Go to Maine.
Okay.
I mean, I would say with something, the benefit with being called in New York, you can obviously, I'm assuming when you say the person says called in Canada, it's probably Ontario. But there's definitely a lot of stuff to do with Ontario hydro and things like that. But I could, there's also anything that deals with Quebec hydro, although admittedly you may need to be called in Quebec and have a civil law degree on that. I say Maine just because I know that one of the big energy companies out here in Alberta called NMAX, they not only do they provide the energy for essentially all of southern Alberta, they also own the Maine energy company, the company that provides the energy for the state of Maine. So there you go. So you could probably stay in New York and Ontario where it's probably very lucrative, or you could go to Maine and say hi to Stephen King.
Yes, that's always good too. Thank you, Graeme. That's fantastic. I have a question, another question for y'all, but I think Director Jones, this one might be specifically directed to you. One of our attendees was recently called to the bar in Ontario, and she or he had a question about the specialized training part of your presentation, and was asking for clarification on how a specialized sort of program can be curated for an attorney.
Okay, no, absolutely. With regards to specialized training, we typically work with groups on that. So usually it's a firm or an embassy or some group, an organization of lawyers that's interested in having a group, and typically that group is of 10 or more people. And they are looking for a specialized training in a particular area. We cover a very broad range of areas. I mentioned only the specialties of our LL.M programs, but we have one of the most extensive course lists in the country for law schools. So, and we have about 70 faculty, full-time faculty members. We have a couple hundred adjunct faculty members. So we cover a very broad range of specialties. So if there is something in particular that someone is looking for, and if it is an individual attorney that's looking for it, then there might be others that are also looking for it. So what I would suggest is contact me at my contact information, and we can look at what it is that you are interested in, and we can let you know if we are aware of others that might be interested in the same. Or if you're part of a firm or organization, then getting that firm or organization on board with wanting some sort of specialized training, reaching out to me, to the University of Houston Law Center, and we will work on developing that program for you.
Perfect. Thank you, Director Jones. Thank you. Before we let you go, I just wanted to follow up with Peter and Jenny real quick in the 2 seconds I promise I'll only take. Could y'all talk a bit just about sort of your overall experience and the difference between like the American practice of law and the Canadian practice? Any reflections or thoughts on that before we let y'all go?
Peter, you're on
Oh,
mute.
you're mute. Oops.
Okay.
Oh, there you go.
Am I back?
You're back.
Thank you.
Thanks,
I would
Jenny.
just like to say, personality wise, I'm a very informal type of person. I've got some high energy approach. I noticed that my personality would often clash, at least initially, and not in major ways, in minor ways, with a more structured approach. So I'm thinking right now of English qualified lawyers that I would often work with. I think perhaps had to take some time to understand who I am as a person and my personality, because I think I would ruffle a few feathers now and then as a young informal American trained attorney. And so I'm not trying to be unkind to anyone. I'm just talking about personalities. And so I also found that to be somewhat the case in Canada, but probably less so than with the English lawyers initially. And again, that's no broad brush here. This is simply from my personal experience.
Perfect. Jenny, what about you?
Sure, I'll be brief. I can't speak to the transactional side because I'm a trial lawyer, but certainly in America, litigation-wise, our courtroom appearances are much more brief than in Canada. For example, in Ontario, when you move for summary judgment, that is often considered a long motion, and you are set for a hearing that will last 6 hours. It is not uncommon, with no evidence being presented. And in Ontario, at least the expectation is that you will read portions of the cases to the court, you will walk through the case with the court. They don't always have the advantage that, for example, federal judges have here with clerks. And, one of the other differences I see, because I live and work in Toronto, and I know a lot of Canadian lawyers, is in Toronto, and I think, I can't speak to Vancouver as much, but in Ontario, there is a awful court backlog, and I'm curious if it's the same in Calgary, to the point where it is crippling the litigation practice in the Toronto area. And I think there's a much bigger openness to arbitration in Ontario with commercial litigation, especially businesses. But we're talking about, if you set a summary judgment motion, it is not uncommon to wait a year for a hearing date. Like, you will set it now. And also the other major difference being it is a cost-based system. So in America, you hire a lawyer and you file suit and you pay your bills unless it's a contract dispute in certain states, right? Or the statute gives it. But in Canada, loser on the motion or the lawsuit pays. What I liked about that was it made people more open to trying to hammer out differences with each other. But the court backlog in Toronto is incredibly serious, and it's throughout Ontario. I guess I know we're running over, but I'd be curious, Graeme, in Calgary, is it the same sort of backlog on commercial matters?
On commercial, I think that they have worked out here to try and make it a bit more a bit better, but there are backlog. I mean, there are backlogs across the country with respect to that, and that's partially due to the constitutional nature of how courts exist in Canada. The Court of Inherent Jurisdiction is appointed by the federal government, but it has to be paid by the provinces. So you run into all sort of fun shenanigans of, well, we need more judges. Well, you're not paying for them. But yeah, there are some court backlogs, and getting a trial for anything can be quite a while. But I know that I would certainly second that going into some form of ADR, alternative dispute resolution, is being pushed. In fact, it's a requirement out here that before you go to trial, you have to meet an ADR requirement unless you get a waiver. But even at that point, like the courts and the Alberta Justice has put in like mediators, like they will provide mediators in certain circumstances to at the very least, like, let's try something, and if not, okay, you're going to trial.
Interesting. Oh my gosh. Okay. I had more questions, but I need to leave y'all alone so y'all can get back to this. Is so interesting. I cannot thank you all for your time today and just sharing your experiences and your hearts with us. This has been so informative for me. I've been taking my own personal notes, so I'll probably be reaching out to the four of you because I'm definitely interested in learning more about what a transnational career could look like for myself. And so I'm again just so grateful for y'all's time, and to all of you who are in attendance today. I know I wasn't able to, I didn't have a chance to talk about our Passport to Calgary program, which Graeme has been such an integral part of planning. I'm just so grateful to him and the CBA office up in Calgary. But just follow us, HYLA, on all our social platforms. We will be putting out information about that. Director Jones has been a great support of that program as well. So thank you all again for your time. Thank you, Director Jones, Graeme, Peter, and Jenny. I hope you'll have a great rest of the week, a safe holiday weekend ahead, and y'all can look for this posted on HYLA's YouTube page very soon. So thank you again. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Bye-bye.
Bye.
wonderful. Thank you.